since 1870. So what we're really going to talk about is whether or not it's a coincidence that we have the tallest brick lighthouse in the entire world here on Cape Hatteras. And it's really not. It's not a coincidence whatsoever. It is actually planned that we have such a tall lighthouse down here. The lighthouse is about 198 feet tall, and the bright Fresnel lens that exists inside can be seen for up to 20 miles. And that's absolutely necessary down here. If you guys have spent any time here, I'm sure you're familiar with our distinction off of the shoreline right here. We're actually known as the graveyard of the Atlantic along Cape Hatteras right here. It's a very, very dangerous area to navigate any type of ship at any day, at any time, through all different time periods down here. We've had hundreds, if not thousands, of shipwrecks off the shoreline down here. It's one of the highest concentrations in the entire world. It's gone on throughout history and will continue to go on as long as we still have the factors off the shoreline, which we definitely will, that we always have had. So the contributing factors to this dubious distinction that we've attained as being the graveyard of the Atlantic are numbers of three. So basically we have a current system off of the coast here. We have a cold current coming down from the north called the Labrador current, and we have a warm current coming up from the south called the Gulf Stream. So why do these currents matter? Well, anybody who's ever seen a thunderstorm or seen what actually happens, you get quite a bit of turbulence right there. These currents actually run real close to the coastline right here. The Gulf Stream runs up the coast here, closer to the east coast than anywhere else on the east coast. So what that actually allowed mariners to do was to make a quick buck, basically, believe it or not. So it was a very lucrative shipping lane down here. If you were coming down from the north, you could take your goods, hop into the Labrador current there, use the Labrador current to assist you, especially in the days of sailing, and take that cold current all the way down to the south, towards the Caribbean there. You could pick up goods in the Caribbean, and then on your way back up to the north, you could hop into the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream would help you up the coastline there, and actually runs along the coast there and heads out towards Europe. So if you wanted to transport towards Europe, or anywhere along the eastern seaboard right there, you would have a really good opportunity to use those currents to your advantage. So that's what made it so lucrative, and that's what made people actually decide that they're going to risk their lives trying to navigate these shorelines to get their goods to where they needed to go, so that they could sell those goods to different people along the eastern seaboard or over in Europe. So as I said, it's numbers of three. The reason we have three different problems over here, we have the cold current from the north and the warm current from the south. So that's what brought so many ships into the shoreline here and made them willing to risk their lives and navigate the shoreline here. But right off the point down here at the end of the island, we have an area known as the Diamond Shoals. So what the Diamond Shoals are an underwater shifting sandbar. It runs about 15 miles out and constantly changes. It constantly changes day by day, second by second. So if you navigated your ship along the shoals this time last year, chances are if you went across that same shoal this year in that same area of the shoal, the topography on the bottom of the ocean would be completely different right there. So it may actually be very, very close to the top of the water there and the surface of the water. So you might have a really good opportunity to run your ship into one of those shoals there. After that happened and you run it into the shoal there, the waves just don't have any mercy along the shoreline right there, and they'll actually rip your piece, or rip your ship to pieces right there on the shoals there. So it made it lucrative to come along this coastline and follow the currents up and down the coastline here. But you have the Diamond Shoals down there, so it was a really dangerous area to navigate down here. There's no doubt about it. So what did they do to combat this problem? They decided that they were going to start building lighthouses down here. So they started building lighthouses, and they decided they were going to put the tallest lighthouse in North America right here on Cape Hatteras to try and combat and try and counteract the dubious distinction of being known as the graveyard of the Atlantic down here. So what I have is a map right here. This is called the Ghost Fleet of the Outer Banks. If you look at this map, every one of these names is actually a shipwreck off here. This is only about 500 examples of shipwrecks off here. There's actually about 1,000 shipwrecks, if not more, off the coastline right here. So you guys can see this is the Ghost Fleet of the Outer Banks right there. That's an incredible amount of shipwrecks. As I said, it's one of the highest in the entire world. So they decided that they needed to start building lighthouses down here. So how did this come about? One story that I like to tell, I like to give Alexander Hamilton a little plug in my program, because the poor guy's really not known for much else other than being shot by a bolt, fired by Aaron Burr, excuse me. So one day Alexander was off the coastline here trying to make his way back up north to attend some schooling in Boston, and his ship actually ran aground off the shoreline down here in the late 1700s. He had a little pull from the government at that time, so he decided that he's going to push to start raising funding to start building lighthouses down here. So eventually, by 1803, they decided they were going to put a lighthouse down here on Cape Hatteras. It wasn't this big, beautiful lighthouse that we see behind us right there. Remember, this lighthouse is 198 feet tall. You could see it for about 20 miles, so that allowed you to get around the 15-mile-long Diamond Shoals off of the shoreline right there. In 1803, they weren't really aware of how far the Diamond Shoals went out and how dangerous of an area this was yet. They knew that lighthouses needed to be here. They knew that shipwrecks were a common occurrence down here. So in 1803, they started to build a lighthouse. So what they did, they built a lighthouse that was about 90 feet tall. It wasn't very tall at all, there's no doubt about it. Like I said, this is 198 feet tall. 90 feet tall, wasn't a very large lighthouse down here. And this lighthouse had a lot of shortcomings to it, there's no doubt about it. So as I said, it's only 90 feet tall. It had a lens inside that burned with whale oil. Whale oil doesn't burn very brightly. You couldn't see this light from very far out to sea, so it really contributed to the danger off the shoreline right here. In addition, the lighthouse was also made of sandstone. So if you guys can imagine and think about it, what color is sandstone? The same color as the sand that's surrounding the lighthouse right there. So if you were navigating along this shoreline right here, coming up the coast and you're trying to spot your marker on the land right there, all you're seeing is sand. You can't see the 90-foot tall sand-colored lighthouse among the sand dunes. So you're in a lot of trouble right there, there's no doubt about it. And that leads to why we paint the lighthouses today. You can see we have the barbershop pattern down here at Cape Hatteras. That's actually referred to as a day marking. So if you're navigating along the shoreline during the daytime right here, you would know how the lighthouse was painted, and you would know where you were in accordance to the shoreline based upon the painting style of the lighthouse itself. So the 1803 lighthouse was only 90 feet tall, didn't have a very powerful lens whatsoever, and was actually the color of sand. This became a major problem, and this light actually became known by local mariners and by mariners across the world as a wretched light. They couldn't understand that the most dangerous area to navigate with your ship, just about in the entire world, didn't have a lighthouse on it that was effective, and didn't have a lens down here that burnt brightly. So you couldn't see the lighthouse at night, and you couldn't see the lighthouse during the day. Once you saw the lighthouse, either during the night or the day, chances are you were probably already too close to shore, and you were in great danger and started to need to make your way back out to shore. So this lighthouse became and gathered just a really, really terrible reputation, but by 1854, a major innovation in lens technology was actually made. By 1854, an individual named Fresnel developed his lens. This lens was called a Fresnel lens. It was developed in France, and what it actually was a sequence of glass stacked on top of each other that created a giant prism system. It magnified light so much that you'd be able to make a lens that you could see for 20 miles out to sea if you put it on the right height of pedestal on there. So they developed the lens, and in 1854, the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse was fitted with a first order, which was the largest varietal of Fresnel lens. So now it had a brighter lens inside of it by 1854. In addition to that, they also added 60 feet to the lighthouse itself, so it went from 90 feet to about 150 feet, so now it was much taller as well. In addition to that, they also painted the lighthouse half white on the bottom and half red on the top. The white you could see amongst the greenery and the sand-colored shoreline right here, and the red you could see amongst the skyline right there. So now by 1854, it was a little bit more effective of a lighthouse. You could see it about 3 additional miles. So it gave you a little bit more time and a little bit more safety along the shoreline right here. But after 1854, a natural process started to rear its head down here on the 1803 built lighthouse. Erosion started to take its toll on the lighthouse itself, and the base started to be dug out from erosion and from the effects of the sand and effects of the constantly changing weather down here. So erosion started to endanger this lighthouse right here. The lighthouse started to sustain some cracks from the winds. It started to get really, really close to the Atlantic Ocean and was in danger of falling into the ocean itself. And the lighthouse was in danger, there's no doubt about it. In addition to that, the lens room, or the room that actually contained the Fresnel lens that burnt the oil inside, was actually very, very tight and got so hot in there that it would combust at certain types of periods. So if you were the lighthouse keeper down then, and you were trying to maintain the light, and you went up there and the light was so hot that it was going to be combusting, it was probably a really dangerous job to have, there's no doubt about it. So there were many fires in the lantern room up there. So eventually this lighthouse just started to deteriorate so much, and they understood that it really wasn't that effective of a lighthouse anyway, so they decided that they needed a taller, more effective lighthouse. So by 1868, plans were made to build the big, beautiful lighthouse that you see behind you today. Lighthouse technology and the building of lighthouses became much, much more efficient and much, much more effective. They had different designs and different plans that they could do, so they could build lighthouses much, much taller than they used to be able to. So by 1868, an individual named Dexter Stetson was hired to build a lighthouse. He's the same guy that designed and built the lighthouse down at Cape Lookout down there. So he started construction of the lighthouse in 1868. But if you guys can imagine, during that time period, it was just really, really incredibly difficult just to get the materials here to build the lighthouse itself. So we all came down Route 12, either south or north up this island here. Well, back in 1870, there were no roads down here. We didn't have Route 12. We didn't have an easy way to get materials here. So they ordered 1.25 million bricks for the lighthouse. How long do you guys think it would take to get 1.25 million bricks here by horse and buggy and over sand?